But the takedown really is on the economic side, like Reagan did it to USSR. We do have an option, take away Chinese banks' ability to settle their transactions worldwide in US dollar.
With Secretary of State Pompeo's landmark speech on China and the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston, America appears to be entering a new era of US-China relations.
We want to have a free 21st century and not the Chinese century of which Xi Jinping dreams. The old paradigm of blind engagement with China simply won't get it done.
According to Solomon Yue, the goal is not containment, but to bring about the demise of the Chinese Communist Party. In this episode, we sit down with Solomon Yue, Vice Chairman and CEO of Republicans Overseas, and a Republican National Committeeman since 2000. He escaped Communist China in 1980 after the Red Guard raided his home and threatened his life during the Cultural Revolution. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. Solomon Yue, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you.
So Solomon, spell it out for me here. You saw a China policy that I suppose changed over this time since 1980 in terms of how the US government approached China. How have things changed, say, over the last 20 years?
Engagement is gone today. And Pompeo said it's not containment. Actually, I agree. I would call it takedown. And the reason is we were so afraid to upset China to a point we wouldn't do anything. Good example will be, since I got first elected to RNC in 2000, I was organizing RNC members' banquets hosted by Taiwanese ambassador to DC. And Bush 43 White House would not allow RNC chairman to attend, only allow RNC co-chairman to attend because they did not want to upset China. I knew we are getting nowhere. My view on China had not changed since I escaped in 1980. But the kind of so-called engagement was getting us nowhere. I knew it because they don't understand the culture. Culturally speaking, they believe zero-sum game. Why take a piece of our pie if they can take the whole thing? That's a concept. Based on that, my thinking was always, one day we have to deal with China. The way we deal with China is like we were dealing with USSR and take it down. That's why Reagan is my hero.
And when you say take down, you're talking about the Communist Party, presumably?
That's correct. Take down CCP.
So, tell me a little bit about, I guess, your background. I understand you actually lived through some of the Cultural Revolution.
Yes, I did. When Cultural Revolution started, I was 7 years old. And I witnessed firsthand the kind of stuff I see today as well. Bring down the statue and beating people up to a point and kill people. And also, personally speaking, Red Guards came to our home, do search and seize assets, seize money, and kick us out of one room. And so another working family can move in and take the room. And just, of course, 7 years old, when you witness this kind of stuff, you couldn't keep your mouth shut. You say, why they take our property? And why they beating people up and beating people up to death? Why they burn books? and you see today too. And so I was vocal and couldn't keep my mouth shut. And then one day, my parents were told, if your son couldn't keep his mouth shut, we would make him disappear in the night. And they pay for the bullet, 6 cents, not much, but still they pay for the bullet. And so my parents was really scared, okay, and told me and warned me, don't do that anymore. But I couldn't help myself. Once you got a big mouth, you got a big mouth, right? Like right now. And so my father told my grandfather, Zhang Yu, who was in Hong Kong, and my late grandfather went to Hawaii for World Methodist Conference, met his friend, Dr. Glenn Orts, formerly U.S. ambassador to UNICEF and the Kennedy administration. By the way, he is a Democrat. And Glenn also was president of Alaska Pacific University then, formerly Alaska Methodist University. So Glenn said, don't worry, I can get your grandson out of China. What I'm going to do for him was to give him a scholarship and write to U.S. Consul General in Shanghai and get him a student visa. And in 3 months, I got my passport and my U.S. student visa, and I landed in Anchorage, Alaska, wintertime, only knowing thank you and Coca-Cola.
Right. No, it's incredible. So you came in kind of, understanding the system in ways that I guess, people who hadn't experienced it couldn't even imagine.
Oh, yeah. And also I realized, America gave me shelter and gave me freedom. And the best thing I can do for America is take down CCP.
Fascinating. So wait, so your whole agenda for decades now has been this?
Oh, yeah. And, it was so disappointing. We had a Republican administration, but they also kiss up to CCP. The good example was RNC members banquet at Twin Oak Estate. And but you do what you can do. One thing you realized, it probably takes time to shift public opinion. Then political leaders will stand up. So it took some time to shift political opinion.
What do you see happening with Hong Kong now as this national security law is coming into full force and we're seeing some of the impacts?
I think some of Hong Kong citizens will be snatched and bring back to China for trial. And that also concerns me as a CEO and vice chairman of Republicans overseas. We have 85 Americans working and living in Hong Kong. And if they speak out against Hong Kong government, Chinese government, especially regarding Hong Kong issues, and they could be in trouble. And I don't want them to go to China and to be tried for treason or whatever accusation they can put on those guys, Americans in Hong Kong, and that would be my most concern for Americans there. Then, of course, those Hong Kong freedom fighters.
Well, this is, coming to a head in a sense because we have, this consulate in Houston that's basically being closed now, or at least the U.S. is demanding that it be closed. Actually, one of the bits of intrigue is that I think in a Politico story, we learned that the consulate is going to be doing business as usual. So, well, what's your analysis of that?
I think consul general, a Chinese consul general in Houston, did a big talk big, and to save face. I think they're going to close the shop and retreat. And as a matter of fact, one thing confirmed as last night, they are going to close U.S. consulate in Wuhan, I believe. And
I think it's Chengdu.
Chengdu, you're right,
Yeah.
Chengdu. Thank you. So if you think about that, and this is settled, but the next one we should watch out for really is San Francisco Chinese Consul General's office. The reason is you don't hire a fugitive and in a diplomatic mission and try to get away in today's political environment. So I tweeted, I said, okay, choice is very simple. Surrender this lady, the researcher, and who lied about her connection with People's Liberation Army on her J-1 visa application. And two, all facing another closure, as simple as that. And so let's see how this one is going to play out. As a matter of fact, by the way, Chinese ambassador is on the line as well, because media already reported, FBI said he was recruiting U.S. scientists to join China's Talent Program 2025. That's not proper ambassador role. And for any ambassador, not just for Chinese ambassador. So pretty soon, Gordon Chang, I asked Gordon, I said, how long do you think he is going to stay in the US? We're going to kick him out. That's the thing. That's the direction the things are going. That's the bottom line.
So, and, apparently Houston was this kind of central hub for Chinese influence operations and espionage.
We actually only knew they run all the association, friendship association, and connection with the U.S. think tanks and all that. But we did not know, and lately they disclosed that actually cyber attacks and runs spy operations. As a matter of fact, they charter a flight and getting all those so-called students out of U.S. and those students don't even have proper names and birthdays. We can match their names and birthdays. That's the bottom line. So yeah, that's something we just learned.
So I guess we'll see actually what happens with Houston. It might even happen before this interview is published, because it takes us a little while to get them out. But I'm indeed very curious. So your expectation is things will close as planned and potentially further closures with San Francisco. Do you think that the CCP will give up the researcher?
Yes, they have no choice. Let me tell you something. I talked about it and I tweeted on Twitter. We know Xi Jinping's makeup, literally, okay? Remember, Xi and Trump had their first state dinner in Florida. And halfway through, President Trump got up and made a call. Ordered airstrikes against Syria, then came back, sit down. I would expect Xi Jinping get up and walk to protest, because that was an insult to his motherland and him as a head of a state. This never happened in our history. A sitting president got up during dinner with a head of a state, and ordered airstrike. You tell me you can't do before dinner or after dinner, right? Okay, so that's the point. He didn't do it. So what that tells all of us, Xi Jinping failed the test. And Trump just tested him, and he didn't realize he'd been tested. So ever since, if you see Xi Jinping try to talk tough, okay, including tear the deal. I mean, remember they negotiated the deal, then afterwards, and he said, no, I don't want that deal, okay? But Trump did not back off. Trump still kept 25% tariffs on all Chinese goods. And in the end, they had to come back and settle for phase one deal. Now, can we trust them? Of course not. But what does that mean? You don't play tough with us. Not with this guy. He's from New York.
So indeed, I think Secretary Pompeo outlined this new approach, or summarized it at least. I mean, there's been these multiple speeches that have come out from O'Brien, from Wray, from Barr. Solomon, I'm just thinking of another element of Secretary Pompeo's speech, which was talking about engaging the Chinese people directly, which frankly I see as a new direction for the U.S. government. I mean, I'm not aware of this being talked about very much at all until extremely recently.
Absolutely. Actually, what was fascinating is who Pompeo invited to his speech. Well-known Chinese dissidents. And the reason this is so important is that, one, he wants to communicate with Chinese people directly. I call divide conquer one. And through those well-known Chinese dissidents in US. Two, the second divide conquer is going hand in hand. Basically, when US leaked the rumor, they're considering that to ban CCP travel to US, to sanction them, to seize their assets. That's another divide conquer between CCP mob families. Okay, couple hundred families. And they all corrupt, they hiding money, they steal from Chinese people, they take the money overseas. By the way, not reporting when they clear US customs. When you come through US customs, you have to disclose anything more than 10,000 US dollars. They come with suitcase full of US dollars, okay? Buy everything with cash, house, in their kids' legit, illegit name, mistress name, concubine's name, wife's name, okay? We know who they are because they stupid enough use cash to buy everything. But guess what? Real estate property, you have to register. It's a county records. It's a city records. We know who you are. Now, when you do that, and they are vulnerable, they understand that. Xi Jinping understands that too. But that is a divide conquer because Xi Jinping fight US and creating a problem for all of them. US just declared ban CCP members travel to US and seize their assets. Now what? So you have divide conquer going on at their highest level as well. So I call divide conquer time 2 strategy.
Well, there were two things that I'm thinking of now that you mentioned this. One is when that was announced, that rumor went out, there was this sort of spike in searches about quitting the CCP on Google, which is anyway, extremely interesting. The other part I was thinking is maybe you can just clarify for the viewership. You mentioned the 100 or several hundred mob families, that in China. So what is the relationship of these families to the Communist Party, to Xi Jinping, and to the Politburo and the Standing Committee and all of this? How does this all work? Very briefly, just so we have a picture.
CCP, after Deng Xiaoping opened up, become a place for second generation Reds and the third generation Reds to use globalization to make money for themselves. So quickly, CCP leadership position become power to steal from Chinese people and to make money for their families. And they smart enough to move the money overseas. Now, we know Pompeo is right, and call Xi Jinping is Marxist. Okay, now that does not mean Xi Jinping's sisters and brothers not doing the same thing, like those CCP mob family members. Okay, so you have 100 mob families out there, and they all control assets, lots of it. And because of that, when you have this kind of fight with Xi Jinping truly is alone on his own, because you threaten mob families' assets, and you want to purge them, so-called under corruption. And what happened is they are going to work against you behind the scene. That's why Xi Jinping disappeared for months at a time, and we don't even know by that high is the summer CCP elders annual conference is going to take place or not this year.
So, and just to be clear, you're calling these mob families because they work like the mob, or what is your thought? I mean, I've heard this used before. And secondly, what is this elder conference that you're talking about?
Every year, by that high is a result. And CCP elders like Jiang Zemin, guys like that, former president, and the former Politburo members, and all get together and to discuss future of China. And Xi Jinping amended Chinese constitution and wants to be a dictator for life. But meanwhile, on that, those elders will force him to name a successor. But problem is, he got more than this problem. The problem is fighting with U.S. threatened fortunes of those elders, families, children's assets. Those are mob families now. And he will not be forgiven for threaten the fortune of those families. And so now we don't even know whether he is going to hold this annual meeting or not.
So there we get a little bit of sort of insider information. We cover this kind of stuff in the Epoch Times extensively, and I think there's a greater and greater interest in it as you're discussing. Solomon, talking about all these elite families that function like mob families, in your view, there's a lot of money at play. And something that we're seeing recently is these bank runs, basically. Like people are withdrawing their savings in large numbers and so forth. How is this related to these ruling family fortunes, and what's going on with these bank runs at all? This is a pretty new phenomenon.
The bank runs really caused by Chinese banks, small, big, set a limit how much money you can take out. I'm talking about renminbi, okay, yuan, how much renminbi you can take out a day. So they're creating that panic to begin with. When you put a limit, you know what happened. Yeah, people don't trust the money they put it in the bank anymore. They would rather put it in shoebox. But to make matter worse is that food inflation and Chinese government printing money. And so money is worth less today and then yesterday. And they realize that, but their concern is, what if you can't pull any money out, all gone, which happened. And so that was one of the issue you see, and this is only getting worse because when you have 250 million people out of job, and they're talking about everybody should start be a vendor, right? Vendor economy, and then flood and natural disaster. They have a food safety issue, food security issue. So things are happening. And the kind of things happening, think about this. We want US-based Chinese dissidents to communicate with Chinese people in China. And they can show the families, children, grandchildren, legit, illegit, driving fancy cars, super duper cars, multi-million-dollar homes they are living in. And meanwhile, Chinese people can't even buy food anymore. What would happen? You will see more fires, more demonstrations. So that's how we envision to bring down CCP.
Do you, in your imagination, okay, is this something that can happen bloodlessly, or is this something that there needs to be, physical, violent revolution?
Xi Jinping is a coward. We know that. I think he is not going to get his third term. And I also see too many 2-star generals, 3-star generals got released. And the latest is commander of Beijing military district responsible for leadership security. 中南海 security, actually. Okay, this really is big. And he is a second generation red elites with family background connect to CCP elites and part of mob family members. When you release people like this, it tells me you are so insecure, and to a point you have to disappear 1 month, 2 months at a time in hiding. And he knows better than we do. And rumor has it, there were several assassination attempts already on him. So how long you're going to be there is a question. And now we see external pressure coming from US, and I call them free nation, the free hyenas, tigers, and lions led by Lion King, right? This group is come at you. The inside, you have grassroots level, you have mob family level uprising. And how long you're going to last? That is the question for Xi Jinping to answer.
Interesting. Do you expect people will actually start quitting the CCP officially, and if these sanctions come into play?
Absolutely. And Xi Jinping talked about he is defender of globalization. Actually, globalization really corrupt CCP members. Today, they are no longer worship Marxism, right? And they worship US dollar, right? And because of that, everybody focus on the money and lip service, okay, loyal to Xi Jinping, and including chanting long live Xi Jinping and long live CCP on the surface only. In reality, everybody do anything for money. So based on that, when their money is threatened and they can't make money, and guess what? They're going to rise up. And that's why any kind of revolution, you have to have two kind rising up. You have to have grassroots as well as elites. Without elites, a revolution fails. Throughout history, when you have elites rise up with grassroots, then revolution will succeed. So by end of the day, we cannot destroy CCP from outside. CCP had to be destroyed within.
Well, basically, the Chinese people have to decide to do it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We can creating an environment for that. That's what Pompeo's speech is all about.
So, you were talking about the money becoming worth less. Do you see the peg against the dollar? I mean, the, ostensible peg against the dollar changing?
Well, I think, the value of yuan is going up clearly, and they are devalue yuan, and at one point we call manipulate their yuan against dollar during the trade war. And so in their mind, they can export more products and absorb the hit from the tariffs. But going to work anymore because nobody buy their products. Their factories are not getting orders. We know that, right? Now, but the takedown CCP from our perspective really is not military takedown. If they want a fight, we are capable of give them a bloody nose. As simple as that. Okay, but the takedown really is on the economic side, like Reagan did it to USSR. And so we do have an option. The option is take away Chinese banks' ability to settle their transactions worldwide in US dollar. Deny their dollar clearance authority. Treasury can do that tomorrow. But I call that as a economic nuclear option. I don't think we have to go there yet. And we can go there in Hong Kong, by the way, okay? And do that to Hong Kong, the banks in Hong Kong, okay? We'll show them what would happen if we do that to all Chinese banks, small and big, including the big four banks.
Well, so yeah, you answered when I asked about the peg, about the renminbi. I'm thinking about the Hong Kong dollar. There's people even making some big bets against kind of against the Hong Kong dollar, keeping that peg. What are your thoughts?
I think probably we'll reach a point we remove, will not allow Hong Kong banks to do US dollar transactions. And when that happens, basically for two purposes. One is clearly to punish China for this Hong Kong national security law. Very important. We have to take a stand. We have to defend Hong Kong freedom fighters and Hong Kong autonomy and freedom as promised by CCP to them. And two, why you think we drop a nuclear bomb in Hiroshima? right? Just to demonstrate what we can do to you. So if you do that in Hong Kong, to the Hong Kong banks, CCP had to think about what we can do to them, to all Chinese banks, small and big, okay? And their economy is going to be in free fall, tanking. So you don't have to have a military fight to make them surrender. We can do an economic engagement, not engagement, I'm sorry, and economic fight, and to bring CCP to down to their knees. That's the bottom line. We know that, okay? But Pompeo is a diplomat. Of course, he is not going to talk like this, right? But we can interpret what he was saying yesterday.
What you're describing, if we were to do that in Hong Kong, if that became the American policy, that would devastate the Hong Kong economy and, of course, the Chinese economy as well, most likely. What are the people you're talking to in Hong Kong thinking about that prospect? I mean, it would be really rough times over there, right?
Yes. I was the last one. They've been telling me, go all the way, okay? And like that for quite some time. I was very, very reluctant. But after CCP passed Hong Kong national security law, I realized I tweeted to Pompeo directly, go for broke. So this is what you're seeing, including go for broke means two things. One, you're not going to allow Hong Kong banks do US dollar transaction. That's the last step. We're going to get there. The first step is revoke Hong Kong Policy Act. Trump already made an announcement on that with a executive order. So this is happening already.
So this is another actually question. So the other sort of key element in my mind of the speech, and I think you mentioned this earlier, of the Secretary's speech, was this idea of creating an alliance of countries that basically have rule of law and some democratic principles and so forth. And you just described it in a very colorful way. How realistic is this? People have been talking about the U.S. stepping back from the global stage. That's been one of the ways that this has been portrayed, and certainly from some of these multilateral organizations, the WHO, the Human Rights Council, and so forth. How do you see this progressing?
I see this, actually, U.S. is the Lion King and provide the leadership for right reason, for principles. During the old days, I hate to go into politics, okay? Now, actually, let me go into politics this way. Today, we see a purpose to bring down a fascist, I call fascist, a new fascist regime. And the reason I call China CCP is a new fascist regime is from the days what they did to Tibetans, what they do to Falun Gongs, okay? Butcher Falun Gong for profit via organ harvesting is the worst kind of crimes against humanity. And worse than Hitler. Hitler just terminated Jews, okay? Now profit from their body parts. And then put 1 million, more than 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, then butcher them as well for profits to sell their organs to Muslim world. And you can't imagine anyone, any civilized countries would do that to human beings. Then what do we see? CCP virus attack on the world. Okay, the minute you stop travel domestically and allow 50, 60,000 Wuhan residents to travel overseas to infect others. More like this is jihadist movement, and instead strip yourself with a bomb and do a suicide mission, they come with a virus and infect others. Right now, worldwide, over 60,000 dead, killed. And US got 147,000 killed. So you realize this is a regime disregard values, disregard human life, and for profit, and try to do anything to dominate the world. Hey, I escaped, and I have no place to go. So it's time to fight, and before they get to me, right? Right now, used to be they kill millions in China. With that virus, they can reach us in the US, anywhere in the world. So if this is not a fight to death, I don't know what else is, but for our own lives and for our freedom. So that's how I see it.
So Solomon, just to clarify, that's 600,000 dead from the virus globally, right?
That's correct. Over 600,000 killed worldwide. Okay. And our US death right now is 147,000.
So Solomon, when it comes to these international relationships, there's a lot of alliances being formed. Traditionally, Russia and China have formed a voting bloc at the UN against the US, right? But that may be changing right now. I don't know about at the UN in general, but India is making some overtures. I know this is something you've been thinking about.
Yes, I do. I have been questioning. I call Xi Jinping Hitler, okay? When Hitler fought two fronts and lost. Then I turn around and realize Hitler is fighting so many fronts, it's not even funny anymore, spontaneously. Hong Kong, Taiwan, South China Sea, and India, and Japan, name a few, right? And US, of course. And when you see this, you say, wow, during Cold War 1.0, we see at least USSR got its Warsaw Pact, those East European satellite nations, states. And today, Putin is not there. Now, for several reasons. One, Putin does not want to be Xi Jinping's junior partner. And the other thing is Putin worried about that Siberia and illegal Chinese immigrants moved to Siberia. As a matter of fact, during CCP virus epidemic, and Putin kicked out 1 million Chinese citizens. And China wouldn't dare to protest and downplay it. But the worst part I saw was Putin got RT. Russian today is 100% controlled TV channel by Putin. Released a clip. Putin speaking Russia called Xi Jinping lone warrior and laugh at him. And Xi Jinping stupid enough to smile back and then even realize this is happening. And Putin got RT released that clip. So it tells me Putin is testing Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping didn't even realize this. So now what happened is you engage India, border dispute. India hit back, kill more Chinese PLA soldiers than they kill India. That's another humiliation for Xi Jinping. Now, Modi went to Russia asking Putin for tanks and air defense system and deliver them immediately. Putin honored. And it tells me Modi actually breaking so-called Xi and Putin's alliance. There isn't no such alliance to begin with, but media want us to believe there is such an alliance. Putin is for Putin. Putin is for Russia. Putin is not for China. And so when you see this, you realized today, if there is an alliance, will be Venezuela, bankrupt, Iran, North Korea, that's China's alliance. For this Cold War 2.05, now, as you can see, militarily speaking, Xi is going nowhere. That's why I'm confident we are not going to have a 45 years Cold War 2.0, period.
So let's talk briefly about the change in the approach to the South China Sea, and Secretary Pompeo mentioned that as well. I think he's described it as 8 years of turning the cheek, so to speak, is over, and we've seen the carrier groups basically, heading into the South China Sea and so forth, which is, completely new phenomenon. What is the implication for Taiwan and for PRC?
Implication for Taiwan is that even though we didn't say anything about we will defend Taiwan, but the bottom line is we will. You can't hold this Quad. By the way, Quad really is India, Australia, Japan, and US, the new alliance plus one, which is UK. UK is sending their latest, the most fancy aircraft carrier to South China Sea as well. So you can't hold the Quad plus one together. And if we don't defend Taiwan, Taiwan will be defended. That's the bottom line. And also, if you see, Taiwan is play a role very, very important to freedom of the world and to bring down CCP as well. And so this is a new phenomenon. Actually, if you remember, U.S. military based in South Korea is a tripwire. And actually, Hong Kong is our new tripwire, based on the concept, if you can't honor Hong Kong people and the basic law and international treaty, and you will never honor anything. That kind of tripwire. So when they pass Hong Kong national security law, they trip the wire, but they didn't realize this. And that brings us come to play, okay, first Hong Kong. Actually, Hong Kong people will say first Hong Kong and Taiwan next. No, first Hong Kong, then we see virus, CCP virus attack on US. That's a second. Between those two, CCP is doomed. We're coming for CCP.
Solomon, this has been a fascinating discussion. Any final words before we finish up?
Yes. In your lifetime, my lifetime, we will see demise of CCP. We will see Chinese people will be freed as well.
Solomon Yue, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Since this interview was filmed, the Chinese consulate in Houston has closed, and the Chinese researcher who took refuge in the Chinese consulate in San Francisco was taken into federal custody.